Hello one and all. Here I start with my thesis presentation on conservation of 19th century historic streetscape in North Kolkata, a case of Chitpur Road. The built heritage in the urban fabric along the street holds a great significance representing the social, cultural and historic aspects of city's identity. The streetscape of Chitpur Road is one such important thoroughfare depicting the traditional aspect of life of Calcutta dating back to 19th century. The structure of the presentation. Panel 1. Introduction to thesis and site. Aim: to develop an integrated conservation management plan for the historic streetscape of 19th century Calcutta, Chitpur Road. Following are the objectives. To give a brief on thesis concern, the British developed colonial architectural style in the central business district and the residential area designated for them. In the Chitpur area of North Kolkata, the people constructed building following European style but modified parts according to their own social customs, individual choice and dictations, thus introducing a new style which was termed as Bangla Baroque and generally called indigenous style. Other old buildings have multifaceted architectural typology and bear history of eminent personalities of the society, thus constituting an overall cultural setting and still houses vibrant communities within them. However, many old buildings are in bad physical condition and have legal litigations. Today, tremendous development pressures and uncontrolled traffic circulation within the historic districts are raising a threat to the historic built fabric, cultural assets and the essence of the place. The study focuses on analyzing and discovering major potential areas for conservation along the streets in 19th century North Calcutta which will preserve and enhance the local identity, uniqueness and cultural assets of the streetscape, preserving and revitalizing the soul of the heritage streetscape of Chitpur Road to reflect the city's unique character. The study is carried through primary and secondary studies at an area level North Kolkata, site level Chitpur Road and building level built heritage at Chitpur Road. Various architectural documentation, mapping and listing are done with physical and social survey for assessment of transformation, analysis of present condition, social structure, neighborhood organization, etc. The whole site of Chitpur Road, approximately 5 kilometers, is divided into 5 major zones to achieve circumstantial studies. Also acknowledging the fact that we are not only looking at historic structures but also the modern buildings as resource for conservation. While dealing with streetscape, it's equally important to acknowledge complex relationship between old and new buildings, showing regional context of Bengal with geographical and physiological study that forms the basis of understanding of colonial response to Bengal and Calcutta's strategic location. The boundary of present Kolkata metropolitan and within it the administrative boundary of Kolkata Municipal Corporation where our site comes under. Current statistics of area, population, governing bodies, expansion and growth of the urban sprawl, etc. Map of Kolkata Municipal Corporation with current administrative boundaries and land use map showing various activity zones. 19th century map of Kolkata showing the heritage areas highlighting the Chitpur area of North Kolkata. Chitpur comes under the jurisdiction of KMC, running parallel to River Hooghly in the west from Lal Bazar in the south to Circular Canal in the north, also showing the wards and the major neighborhoods. Map showing the extent of 19th century Calcutta in context of the present day KMC administrative boundary. Analyzing the surface configuration, the contours, the slope elevation that shows a moderately flat site with highest elevation of 21 meters. Delineating the study area, identifying the two parts of Chitpur Road as historically named Upper Chitpur and Lower Chitpur Road with the neighborhood of Jorashako being the center. Panel 2. Historic evolution and architecture. Calcutta served as the capital city of British India from 1773 to 1910. Calcutta as a city didn't exist before the arrival of the British merchants. 3 villages, one popular for cotton, Shutanuti, one for the pilgrimage, Kolkata and other had few local businessmen and zamindars. Govindapur were leased to the East Indian Company to set up their factories. Chitpur Road marked the foremost link connecting the Chitteshwari temple in the north and to Kalighat temple in the south. Hence it was looked upon as a pilgrim access and was the most prominent primary link in the north-south direction. Analyzing the city morphology showing growth pattern, historic course, the primary settlements of Govindapur, Kalighat and Shutanuti along Chitpur Road. Historic map showing first surveyed map of Calcutta 1789, the colonial settlement and Chitpur Road serving as the main access road. North Calcutta, the White Town 19th century settlement mapping at North Kolkata, Chitpur. Historic photograph showing the past with traditional building settings, road character and present context of urban chaos along Chitpur Road. Mapping road linked during 19th century the primary and the secondary arteries, the zones that made North Kolkata, residential fabric along the old axis of Chitpur Road, institutional buildings along new axis and the European quarters. Architectural evolution and development. The vernacular architecture of Bengal, the hut or pavilion house, the most pervasive architectural present in the Deltic region. In the understanding the vernacular pavilion house in its original setting would help in analyzing the degree and areas of alteration that the courtyard houses in North Kolkata has gone through and the various levels and the reasons for the same. The roofing style of Bengali Hindu temple architecture known as Chala Jor Bangla style is a unique, close related and evolved version of paddy roof traditional building style of rural Bengal. Keeping the outer shell constant in the 19th century came strongly under European influence and a new flat roof temple style design came up. Gradually the type lost its traditional characteristics, become a mere pakka ghar. The connection with the temple and religious activity was translated into the urban houses in the form of Thakur Dalan in the public courtyards forming the heart of the Zamindar's house. influence of colonial architecture as the native quarter in the North Kolkata was developing and flourishing simultaneously with its European counterpart, it became evident why the rich native merchants chose a similar language of architecture with increased emphasis on facade making. Historic photographs of development process at colonial town of Calcutta, south of Chitpur Road. Panel 3. Chitpur Road with zonal divisions, streets and neighborhood analysis. Chitpur Road divided into 5 zones on the basis of primary nodes, keeping Chitpur as the main primary axis, marking the primary secondary linked streets to Chitpur Road. Schematic mapping of the neighborhood. Originally, each pada houses people belonging to the same caste or occupation only, as the inhabitants were newly transforming from an agrarian economy into the village to a more trade commerce centric economy in Calcutta. The distribution pattern changed over time. Distribution of houses within a para. The zamindars and the rajbaris, apart from their display of wealth, also served many functions to the neighborhood and the society in 19th century Calcutta. These courtyard houses provide a unique mix of public and private spaces in the primary aspect of village formation had a shift in the social and structure and cluster planning. With the introduction of roads, a different pattern seemed to evolve, where the previous cluster planning gave way to a more linear settlement determining by the road network. Physical characteristics of the para. Each of these neighborhoods had evolved a harmonious architecture. The lane with the dwellings and their rocks leaning both sides of the lanes, giving the para a human scale factor and encouraging community interaction among residents, creating an urban ambience in which residents, streets, the micro and the macro neighborhoods are formed. At an urban level assessment, there are major 5 potential areas that are identified. Proximity to the river. The traditional residential zone grew along Chitpur Road as it was more close to the river as the traditional port which facilitates trades and transport. The bazaar based economy. The proximity to the river was also main reason for thriving whole bazaar, with the Bara Bazaar becoming the center of traditional market economy and was cosmopolitan in its essence. Dense building fabric with rich historic and architectural character. Nature of urban spaces within the native quarters. Ethnic and other diverse communities. For example, the first Chinese communities settlement in India. Tram as the industrial heritage are an inherent part of Chitpur's history and culture. Mapping of early tram routes and the current day activity routes, the development of tram over time and the identification of the current crisis. Panel 4. Built heritage at Chitpur Road. The focus of interior changed in 19th century. New urge to outdrawly display residences as symbol of wealth and structure came into the picture. These elements of direct contact with the streets were evident in mansions along the main artery of Chitpur Road in the locality called Jorashako and Pathuria Ghata. 32. Public life from 19th century Calcutta spilled over from the streets to encompass the building ages that adorned with them elaborate arcades and verandas. Facades became a strategic extension of domestic space and distinctions between public and residential. But then the street could work as an observable regulatory frame defining one's social location. The feature developed our entrance porch with parapet, statues, cast iron railings, canopies leading to Thakur Dalan, continuous veranda along the facade, etc., showing various areas where facades and social conducts goes hand in hand. The public zone or Bahir Mahal was the platform through which the house interacted. The private zone or Andar Mahal have 4 basic type of activities: courtyard centric, ritual spaces, living spaces and service spaces. Analyzing the traditional dwelling typologies of common people with typical planning layouts. Centrally located shared spaces surrounded by rooms that could be rented individually or as suited. Typically, the ground floor rooms were used as shops and the upper floor rooms were used for residential purpose. The colonial influence can be observed at various levels. For example, at design level, the courtyard surrounded by colonnade, bifora windows, statues, etc. At a volumetric level, the overall height of the spaces have similarities where the ground floor and the first floor's volume of both are greater than the second floor. At an organization level, site of the will from the bungalows were similar typologies, built only 1/4 the plot area. The zamindar houses were built on the street front with maximum land uses. Design alterations were done responding to climatic conditions, like between the columns, the thin screens of wooden ribs or cloven bamboos were placed for breaking sunlight, and terrace roofs to get rid of rainwater. Characterized elements of Euro-Indian architecture. Panel 5. Building typologies of the Bengali elites, the zamindars and the rajas. There are 4 common typologies, as courtyard being its nucleus. The typologies has been identified based on the number and sizes of courtyard. Typology 1. Single courtyard with a colonnade structure. Typology 2. Single open courtyard. Typology 3. Dual courtyard with almost similar in size, both inner and outer courtyards. Typology 4. Dual courtyards with large outer courtyard and smaller inner courtyard. Analyzing the characteristics, architectural character, spatial layout and various activities within for each of the typologies, like business areas, ceremonial spaces, religious spaces, storage and service spaces, etc. Madan Mohan Temple, an example of colonial architecture amalgamating into the traditional Thakur Dalan, constructed during early 19th century, showing prominent Ionic and Doric order. The stained glass windows that are characteristic features of Christian churches. Roy Thakurbari, the near absence of European influence on elements of the facade of the Thakur Dalan or Thakurbari other than the bifora windows. The facade had established itself as a strong and dominant public face of the house. Status enhancing large layer clearly evident through the symmetrical structuring and non-uses of those elements in any other parts of the dwelling. The spatial hierarchy hierarchy of the vernacular tradition in two areas can be directed to the same. The sequential movement starting from the public entrance, Shinghaduar, and associated spaces and ending at the Khirki Duar and service areas. The room veranda courtyard pattern evident in each functional block. By that time, in 1876, the zamindars had consolidated their position in society and British patronage was not the primary priority. Hence, the facade could afford to break away from the strict adherence to the classical forms, incorporate alternate facade columns and opening. The degree of ornamentation also showcasing Indo-Islamic architecture and the size of the Thakur Dalan thus emphasizes its significance in the power play of 19th century. Similar to the trends in Calcutta, the use of impermanent material in the construction of domestic architecture gradually reduced. Brick, lime, stucco, cast iron, etc. were some of the common building material used. As the general soil condition in the area was swampy with marshy land in the east, having difficulty to build heavy structure. In addition, the brick and plaster works were subjected to rapid disintegration owing to a saline soil. Building use and height analysis. Building use mapping also demarcating the historic zones. Metro's impact has been observed in terms of conversion of residential to apartments to mixed use and residential or mixed to commercial and new development on open vacant land. Land parcels have amalgamated to take leverage of permissible height, higher development opportunities in terms of FSI and building height. Schematic section of building use at different levels are also shown. Analysis chart showing concentration of commercial, mixed use and residential for each zone. Also the rate of transformation in terms of new construction. For example, zone 1 and zone 2 showing major concentration in commercial activities and zone 5 has major residential areas and also has gone through major transformation than rest of the other zones. Through sketches discussing cases of continuity, transformation, decay, etc. at various building levels. Building height mapping. Land use densification has emerged in terms of increased building heights due to increased demand of commercial and rental spaces, land scarcity for horizontal expansion and favorable development opportunity. Higher uses of FSI is observed in the immediate vicinity. 3D module of building height mapping along Chitpur Road. Panel 7 activity mapping. Mapping of 27 major activities along Chitpur Road. Images showing the present day context at different street sections. Also mapping of traffic and footfall density at different time intervals over a day to derive into a comparative concentration analysis for each zone at different time level. 60-61 street sections for all zones showing the building outer profile in relation to the street, also showing the total road width, carriageway, footpath, tram tracks and encroachments at different levels. Analysis chart showing various encroachment at each zone. For example, zone 1 experiencing highest encroachment in terms of vehicular, vendor, illegal shop extension, etc. Zone 5 compared to the rest of the zone experiencing lesser encroachments. Community mapping, socio-cultural activities. Mapping of 9 communities, religious and ethnic groups along Chitpur Road, for example Chinese, Bengali Muslim, Jain, Marwaris, Bengali Brahmins, etc. The neighborhood festivals with places where they are celebrated are marked. The aristocrat houses still preserve this traditional style of worship starting from iconography to offerings. In these houses there is a dedicated area for festivals called the Thakur Dalan or Durga Dalan. Overlaying the activity and community mapping to get the idea of activities the communities are involved in. For example, the Pal community of Kumotoli involved in making idols. Schematic section of workshops in relation to the street also showing the living and working conditions. And Bengali food has inherited a large number of influence arising from historical and strong trade links with many parts of the world. Bengali fell under the way of various sultanate rulers from early 16th century onwards and was then governed by British for 2 centuries. Also many communities contributed in the same. For example, the Jewish brought bakeries to Bengal. The Marwaris contributed with their sweet making skills. Panel 9 study of the pilot area zone 2. Analysis of building use, height, age, building type, current state of transformation, ownership status, building condition, infrastructure, etc. For each category there are further subcategories. Detailed charts and listing has been done to show the number of buildings falling under which particular subcategory. The analysis will help us to understand the building significance, its current state of condition at different levels, various factors, reasons for transformation of the buildings. It will also guide us to the kind of conservation approach to be taken for each buildings. Street elevation showing buildings maintaining the skyline and architectural harmony, building that went through transformation and modern new constructed buildings. Panel 11. Building listing and condition assessment. The listing was carried out on the ground with the support of building inventories. 480 plus buildings have been listed covering all 5 zones along with its condition assessment. A neighborhood level listing has also been carried out following the same process. Building grading is done according to its significance, which is defined on 3 parameters: historic value, architectural value, authenticity and integrity. Each has further been divided into subcategories which will mark its degree: high, medium or low. For example, to achieve a higher significance, a building has to get marked high degree for all 3 parameters. High significant buildings is marked as grade 1, medium grade 2, low grade 3. Another classification is added on the basis of low significance and new construction that comes under grade 4. After grading, condition assessment is also done simultaneously to formulate conservation approach and strategies in the near future. Panel 12. Issues and challenges are identified at building level, neighborhood level and community level, also marking the majorly affected zones. Issues with grading of building: grade 1 and grade 2 heritage building, zamindar bungalows and rajbaris. Grade 1 tag on building saves it from getting modified or demolished, but it does not protect it from decaying. Owner and tenant conflicts versus versus Heritage Commission. Developer I-Land. City's history is fading with the demolition of old structure. Circulation, activity and encroachment issues. Oldest running tram in the threat of discontinuity. Challenges faced by ethnic communities. Migration in slums. Pilgrim and visitor issues with public infrastructure. Ecological issues related to river ghats and dumping grounds, etc. Various potentials such as redevelopment, management plan, adaptive reuse, design interventions, etc. are identified at various locations along Chitpur Road and map. Legislation and jurisdiction. Study on the Constitution of India's provision for heritage and heritage acts at central level. Formation of West Bengal State MSR Act as corresponding to the Central Act of MSR Act 1958. However, the results of the work done for preservation of the lesser known cultural heritage by state government has been inadequate. This is mainly because of their responsibility has been subsidiary to that of the Archaeological Survey of India. Under Town and Country Planning Act and Municipality Act, two acts were formed: West Bengal Heritage Commission Act 2001 and KMC Act on Heritage Conservation. Heritage Committee under KMC takes initiatives in looking after the heritage within KMC administrative boundary, where Chitpur Road also comes under. Studying the silent features of KMC Heritage Act, the kind of initiative it takes to protect heritage buildings, organization structure, general conditions of tax exemption, etc. Definitions given by KMC on heritage and existing guidelines and condition for grading. Also discussing the major problem faced by KMC in heritage conservation, etc. Revision of West Bengal Heritage Act 2001 and its benefit. The Commission will regulate the development of all areas declared as heritage precincts. It will also provide guidelines on how tall buildings and what will be the design for their facade, ground coverage, FAR, building height and list of permitted use. Introduction of transfer of development right and an instrument that will enable them to unblock the commercial value of the heritage lands. Also focusing on the areas of intangible heritage. Case study of Calcutta High Court on heritage building disputes with KMC. All this study will help to understand the condition of heritage management, the drawbacks and challenges faced by both the people and the Heritage Commission, so that future further effective recommendations on heritage guidelines can be done and given. Panel 14 case studies on urban conservation initiative in World City of Ahmedabad and Jaipur Heritage Management Plan. Philosophical debate on what needs to be protected as heritage and why. Is grading enough to protect heritage building? The idea of transforming Kolkata Chitpur Road into a world, starting with the thesis proposal. Road heritage to identify the issue, finding the potential solutions, learning from the case studies and finally formulating the guidelines. The principles to follow are conserving the heritage value, minimum interventions, retaining authenticity and integrity, etc. 97. The approach is a value-based approach determining the primary treatments of preservation, rehabilitation and restoration, and also towards a participatory approach, as the study shows the North Kolkata Chitpur Road is capable of tackling the conservation efforts through participation of general public of the neighborhood. The whole idea of participatory approach is to make conservation a sustainable activity through people's help with professional guidance. This has been conceptualized in the proposal for conservation through the legal instruments, role of various organizations, government and private, NGOs, land use proposal and the financial schemes and various welfare policies. Role of organizations: Kolkata Municipal Corporation, KMDA, Kolkata Metropolitan Development Authority. KMDA identifies the neighborhood which are to be taken special care about conserving the heritage. KMC will overall see the process. The Heritage Commission will act as the representative of the KMC in identifying the heritage structures. The financial feasibility of the whole conservation project will be taken care of by the KMC and the neighborhood organization on a shared basis, along with the support of various financing agencies like HUDCO. Also mentioning the role of owners of the heritage buildings. Other financial provisions as government to allocate funds annually irrespective of revenue deposited, laws allowing the heritage body to raise money by ways of loans, forms of tax relief to encourage private sector to contribute to heritage protection, etc. The conservation process has 3 stages: decision making, implementation and monitoring. The stages have been further divided into sub stages based on the particular task and the supporting agents. For example, decision making stage 1, the task is to prepare preliminary issue report, area of work in the neighborhood. The helping agents are conservation architect, NGOs, resident and owners. 101, following are the proposal, guidelines and policies, and also mentioning the future work areas. 102, the guidelines and policies are proposed at 3 levels: the building level, street or area level and community level, and are interlinked within. Some are active only at a single level and others at an intermediate level that are active in both levels. For example, guidelines for development and redevelopment and new construction has its implementation both at building level and street level. Guidelines for conservation implementation strategies for the listed building based on the condition assessment. The implementation strategy has 3 stages based on the combination of grading and building condition. The priority is given on the basis of building grade and the conservation action on the basis of building present state of condition. Stage 1, grade 1, type B and C requires immediate action. Grade 2 and 3 plus type B and C requires response and action plan. Stage 2, grade 1, 2 and 3 plus type A medium requires work in near future. Stage 3, grade 1, 2, 3 and 4 plus type A, G needs to be preserved in current conditions and need maintenance. For example, the total number of buildings in zone 1 is 73, out of which 15 are in good, 30 in medium, 24 in bad and 3 buildings are in critical condition. Combining it with grade, 8 buildings are in grade 1, 19 in grade 2, 16 in grade 3, 29 in grade 4. The findings are 2 buildings in zone 1 needs immediate action, 16 building requires action plan and response, 17 building requires conservation work in near future and 15 buildings need to be maintained in current state. The chart shows the comparative analysis with Zone 2 having highest building require immediate action, also highest in the building that requires work in near future, and Zone 5 has highest number of building that needs only maintenance, etc. Guidelines for conservation measures at building level. This is for the both interior and exterior features. The measures are for the prominent architectural characters found out through the study process, which holds high significance. Recommendations for roofing, recommendations for doors and windows, recommendations for entrance and verandas, recommendations for shop fronts, recommendations for building facade, recommendations for site and precincts, building level recommendation for interior features, recommendations for structural system. 111 recommendations for space, design features and finishes, recommendations on use of building material and surface treatments. Duplicating the exact form, material, style and detailing of the historic building in a new addition so that the new work appears to be a part of historic building is not recommended for all the above cases. While it is important that the new building and the alterations be compatible with the historic context, it is not necessary to limit or imitate older building style. In fact, stylistically distinguishing new building form in their older neighborhood in the historic district is preferred. An architectural design template to be made to provide a range of selective preference to have a balance and harmony between the new and the old. Guidelines for new additions and redevelopment. Placing functions and services required for new use in non-character defining interior spaces rather than constructing a new addition. While constructing a new floor on the already existing structure, courtyard should not be closed. Verandas should not be encroached by extending the walls and converting the space into the balcony. Also providing new regulations and restrictions for development and redevelopment, also emphasizing on the implementation of the existing regulation for the same. In multi-storied courtyard buildings, the courtyard result in more height and self-shading on the facades overlooking the courtyard. Guidelines for courtyard height and building depth proportions. Guidelines for development and design of new construction. In terms of placement and orientation, maintaining the alignment of the building, orient the primary entrance of the building towards the street. A new building should maintain the alignment of the horizontal elements along the block, maintaining the visual building scale of 2 to 4 stories in height. Clubbing of the properties is not permissible as this would lead to high rise. Original footprint to be respected, etc. Regulations and restriction in building height to maintain skyline and architectural harmony. Building within the heritage precincts or in the vicinity of the heritage site shall maintain the skyline and the following architectural style. Building height regulation guidelines for each zone as given below. Zone 1 G+2 to G+3, Zone 2 to G+3 to G+4, Zone 3 to G+2 to G+3, Zone 4 G to G+1, Zone 5 G+1 to G+2. Existing area and height bylaws for North Kolkata given by KMC. Studying upcoming KMC's new building rules to benefit middle class and its effect on heritage. For example, amending its building rule to provide better facility to people belonging to the middle class who propose to construct new buildings on smaller plots and on narrow lanes and roads. Proposal for rehabilitation. Any additional of floors to the historic building that violates the height regulation built illegally without the permission of Heritage Commission that has altered the building use that result in the deterioration of the building condition and destroyed the historic character is strongly discouraged. The additional structures need to be removed carefully without causing any harm to the main historic structure, and the occupant shall be rehabilitated. The whole process to be carried out under the supervision of Heritage Commission, Kolkata Municipal Body and the Kolkata Development Authority. Buildings in Zone 2 proposed for the same are identified, calculating the household ratio and the total number of people to be rehabilitated. Proposal for adaptive reuse such as homestay, heritage hotel, visitor center, live museum, art and craft center. The original use is the best option for the point of conservation as it entails minimum interventions in the fabric of the building. But under changing circumstances, new options need to be explored. The decision of reuse should be, however, based upon the clear understanding of the original planning and design of Rajbaris, being guided by the principles of conservation, and should be one which protects the significance of the Rajbaris and its structural integrity at all costs. Guidelines for development of public infrastructure, road character and open spaces, footpath and carriageway, bus stop and on-street parking, recommendations for parking and street light, regulation and restrictions. On no exposed electric wires and unwanted overhead lines shall be allowed. All the wirings to be placed underground to clear the visual mess and to give a clear vista of the heritage character of the street. Also reducing the fire hazards. Transformers not to be placed on road and existing transformers to be relocated and planned at a specific location. And guidelines for road character and open spaces, seating, sidewalks, street corners, public art, adda zones and community event spaces, alley and infill spaces designed for the stormwater drainage. 130. Proposal for street vending. Street vendors should be accommodated where there is a demand for their goods and services near major intersections, public transport stops, parkings and so on. Pedestrian islands on meandering streets can accommodate street vendors at regular intervals. Regulation and restriction for encroachments. Encroachment of the porticos, footpaths and vending activity taking support of the building facade, covering the building facade is not permitted and to be removed. Shops are not allowed to extend and encroach the footpaths if found so will be penalized according to the framed policies. Design intervention in respect to the heritage character. Guidelines for pedestrian interest and safety. The historic district should continue to develop as a pedestrian-oriented environment. Of the building should relate to pedestrian by using material and a human scale compatible to local historic patterns. Developing the ground floor level of a project to encourage pedestrian activity. Avoid blank walls or the appearance of a vacant lot, etc. Design guidelines for turning radius, refuge islands, crosswalk, bollards, etc. Future work areas. These areas falls not only on conservation but multidisciplinary domains. Suggestions and recommendations are proposed but requires multidisciplinary approach and inputs from professional from specialized work fields. Proposals for utilizing the riverage, revival of the historic ghats and the connecting streets. Proposal for revival of tram tracks to be restored and repaired, the poles to be restored, repaired, and the missing and the damaged poles to be replaced with the new ones to continue the power line connectivity. The tram routes with new timings are proposed after the study and analysis of activity and pedestrian movement along with the footfall and traffic density mapping. 136-137 Guidelines for pre-disaster responsiveness at a settlement level, precincts, site and surrounding level based on the study and effects of Amphan in recent times to the area of Chitpur. Policies for tax exemption and penalties, policies for owners, stakeholders and tenants, proposed organizational structure of Heritage Zonal Committee, smart monitoring of heritage site Chitpur Road, heritage use of drones, monitoring using remote sensing data and GIS, virtual reality for cultural heritage tourism, IoT based monitoring approach for cultural heritage sites, smart monitoring and assessment at building level, structural system, material characterization using NDT test, use of tomography, infrared surface testing, etc. Use of software to create building module and architectural features. Guidelines for signages, door, outdoor display structures, regulating guidelines for signages, billboards and nameplates, new proposed street signage, nameplate featuring building code, grading condition, assessment value. The study formulated guidelines and proposals will perhaps contribute to create awareness to tackle the conservation efforts and protect the rich heritage of Chitpur Road through participation of the general public of the neighborhood. The awareness has to reach at different strata and group of society. All the stakeholders has to come together to develop a conclusive plan to save the street character from vanishing into oblivion. The listing and condition assessment done will help to identify certain buildings, precincts, open spaces to strategize the conservation action plan to ensure that their special interest is taken fully into account in decisions affecting their future, and for the government to include this as an asset in the planning process, laying down appropriate laws and guidelines for protection. Thank you.